FIFA expects to make around $13 billion from the current World Cup cycle, thanks mostly to the 2026 tournament in North America. That's more than many entire sports leagues make in a year, all from one event that happens once every 4 years, and it only lasts about a month. So where does all that money actually go? And why are host cities willing to spend billions just for the chance to be a part of it? In this video, we're going to break down how the World Cup really makes its money, who actually gets paid, and what the business model means for fans, host cities, and national teams. From a fan's perspective, the World Cup is all about pride, pressure, and history. You see the flags, the anthems, the drama of penalties, and it feels like the entire world has stopped to watch your country play. If you ask most people where the money comes from, they'll say tickets, tourism, and maybe jersey sales. Millions of people flying in, hotels selling out, and stadiums charging high prices. It's easy to assume that's what drives the business. But from FIFA's perspective, the World Cup is a global media and sponsorship platform. The real money isn't just the fans in the stadium, it's the billions of people watching on screens and the brands paying to reach them. Once you understand that, the rest of the business model starts to make sense, especially why FIFA can expect roughly $13 billion in revenue this cycle, even though it doesn't pay to build the stadiums or upgrade the local infrastructure itself. Let's start with the basics. How does FIFA actually earn those billions from the World Cup? There are four main money streams: media rights, sponsorships and marketing, ticketing and hospitality, and licensing and merchandising. First, media rights. These are the TV and streaming rights that broadcasters pay for so they can show World Cup matches in their country. For the 2023 to 2026 cycle, broadcasting is projected to be FIFA's biggest single revenue source, bringing in well over $4 billion. Some estimates put it around $5.3 billion over the cycle, roughly 40% of total revenue. Whenever you see a World Cup game on a major network or streaming platform, that company has already paid FIFA a huge fee for that content. The host city doesn't get that TV money, it flows straight to FIFA. Second, sponsorships and marketing rights. Global brands pay to be official World Cup partners and sponsors. That means logo placements on billboards, digital signage, fan events, and in a lot of the official content. In the last cycle covering Qatar 2022, FIFA made around $1.8 billion from marketing rights alone. For this current cycle, sponsorship revenue is expected to climb to somewhere in the neighborhood of $3 to $4 billion. Third, ticketing and hospitality. FIFA controls official match tickets and premium hospitality packages, often with specialist partners handling on-the-ground sales and logistics. For the 2026 tournament, ticketing and hospitality revenue is forecast to jump from under $1 billion in 2018 to roughly $3 billion, thanks to more games, bigger stadiums, and an expanded 48-team format. That includes everything from regular seats to high-end suites with catering and VIP treatment. Finally, licensing and merchandising. FIFA licenses the World Cup brand for official balls, jerseys, video games, and other products. This is the smallest slice, but still significant. Hundreds of millions of dollars over a cycle from fans buying officially branded gear and digital content. If you put it all together, FIFA's revised budget projects around $13 billion in revenue for the 2023 to 2026 cycle, up sharply from previous cycles. Roughly speaking, about 40% is media rights, around 25 to 30% is hospitality and ticketing, and another 20 to 25% is sponsorship, and the rest comes from licensing and other sources. So when you hear World Cup money, think less about tickets at the stadium and more about a global package of TV, sponsors, and premium experiences sold to companies and high-end spending fans. Of course, none of this happens in a vacuum. Someone still has to pay to build or upgrade stadiums, improve roads and trains, and keep millions of visitors safe. That burden falls mostly on host countries and host cities. Big cost bucket number one is stadiums. Some World Cups involve building new venues almost from scratch. Others require major renovations to meet FIFA standards. Capacity, media facilities, security, hospitality areas, and more. Those projects can cost billions of dollars overall when you add up multiple stadiums. This also applies more to the other World Cups in the past than the one in USA because the USA has so many stadiums already. Cost bucket number two is infrastructure. Airports have to handle higher passenger loads, public transit has to move huge crowds on match days, and cities invest in roads, rail links, and sometimes even new transport lines. Cost bucket number three is security and event operations. That means police, private security, crowd control, emergency services, and everything around fan zones and public viewing areas. For the 2026 World Cup, the US, Canada, and Mexico have an advantage. They can use existing large stadiums, like I mentioned earlier, especially American football venues, instead of building everything from scratch. But host cities are still looking at significant bills for temporary changes, security, city services, and fan events. Some studies suggest that U.S. host cities could face direct costs in the hundreds of millions once you add up public safety, traffic management, and city-run fan experiences. Those expenses are typically covered by local and national governments, in other words, by the taxpayers. Meanwhile, FIFA does not pay for stadium construction or major infrastructure. It comes with the tournament, collects the centralized World Cup revenues, and then leaves once the event is over. Now, let's zoom in on the 2026 cycle, because this is where the numbers get really eye-catching. FIFA's own budget and public statements say it expects to generate about $13 billion in the revenue over 2023 to 2026, with the expanded Men's World Cup in North America doing most of the heavy lifting. Of that total, roughly $8.9 to $9 billion is just coming from the 2026 tournament alone. Broadcast rights are forecast to bring in more than $4 billion, while sponsorships and marketing could also approach that $4 billion figure, and ticketing and hospitality could end up around $3 billion. On the economic impact side, FIFA and various studies project that hosting the 2026 World Cup could add around $40 to $41 billion in GDP across the USA, Canada, and Mexico combined. One widely cited estimate suggests global output from the event in that range, with around $17 billion of that impact in the U.S. economy alone. For individual U.S. host cities, earlier analysis have suggested incremental economic activity in the rough range of $160 to $620 million per city, depending on the number of matches and visitor spending. Those figures cover things like hotel stays, restaurants, local transport, temporary jobs, and tax revenues. The key point here is that the numbers are big on both sides. FIFA sees record commercial revenue, and host regions see sizable headline GDP and tourism boosts. But those local boosts have to be weighted against the public costs we already talked about in the last section. So when you line it all up, the revenue streams and the costs, who actually comes out ahead? At the top of the list is FIFA. By owning the World Cup brand and centralizing the media, sponsorship, and ticketing rights, FIFA sits in the middle of a $13 billion cycle and captures most of the direct revenue. It does share money back through prize pools and development programs, but the core commercial value remains under its control. Host countries and cities are in a more complicated position. They don't receive a cut of global broadcasting deals or top-level sponsorship contracts. Most of the money they see is indirect: visitor spending at hotel restaurants, local transport, short-term jobs, and tax receipts from that activity. If visitor numbers are strong and existing stadiums can be used, those benefits can be very meaningful. But if hosts overbuild stadiums or underestimate operating costs, they can be left with big bills and venues that are hard to use after the tournament. Next, national teams and their federations. They make money primarily through World Cup prize money and participation payments. For 2026, the total prize pool is expected to be in the hundreds of millions of dollars, with the champions taking home more than $50 million, and every participating team guaranteed a significant baseline payment plus preparation funds. For many federations, that helps fund coaching, youth development, and future competitions. Then you have local businesses. Hotels, bars, restaurants, rideshare drivers, and tourism operators can see a big spike in demand during the tournament. Some will have their best month or two of revenue ever. So who really profits overall? FIFA clearly wins on the commercial side, stacking up billions in centralized revenue. Host cities and countries can win, but they can also lose depending on how much they spend, how well they plan, and how much of that visitor spending is truly new rather than just shifting from other times of the year. Teams and local businesses benefit, but on a much smaller scale than the governing body itself. That's why there's so much debate around modern World Cups. Cities are competing hard to host, but the biggest and most predictable financial upside is concentrated at the top for FIFA. Since prize money is such a visible part of the story, let's quickly lay out how that works for 2026. Reports around the tournament indicate that the total prize pool for the Men's World Cup is now above $800 million, with additional funds set aside for preparation and club compensation. The champions are expected to earn around $50 million and the runners-up in the mid-$30 million range. This meaning that Argentina has already locked up a $30 million paid day with Spain and can only increase up to that $50 million amount. That steps down for third, fourth, and all the way through the group stage. Every team that qualifies also receives participation and preparation money, which means even nations that go out early see an 8-figure check. For smaller federations, that's a game-changing amount of money. It can fund training, centers, youth academies, and future qualifiers. But even here, if you compare it to the $13 billion in expected cycle revenue, the prize pool is only a fraction of what FIFA takes in, and they might need to up those prize pools in the future. So while teams and players are earning more than ever, the balance of financial power remains tilted heavily towards the organization. So what should we take away from all this as fans, residents, or business-minded viewers? First, the World Cup is not just a tournament. It's a carefully engineered global business engine. FIFA has designed a system where it owns the most valuable assets, the media rights, the top-level sponsors, and the official ticketing and hospitality, and it can plug them into any host city that meets its requirements. Second, host regions are chasing more than just the direct profit. They're looking for the economic boost, the long-term branding, the visibility, and the tourism. That's why the key question isn't just how much money does FIFA make, but is the trade-off worth it for places that host? So I'll throw it to you. Should cities keep bidding for the World Cup, or does FIFA capture too much of the upside compared to what local residents actually get back? Let me know in the comments, and let me know what other business sides of sports you want to see us do videos on next.